Right, here we are, back in the Lake District, about to take on two pretty tough climbs in one ride. The first one is the Struggle, still in Lake District near Windermere, and the second one is Kirkstone Pass. So the day before I recorded this video, I did Rhino's Pass, not Winrose Pass, as I said in the other video, but Rhino's Pass. I have corrected my pronunciation. But yeah, that was a horrible climb, and this one is equally as bad. This one doesn't have the sustained gradients of Rhino's Pass, but it is quite a bit longer. So overall, we are looking at 4 kilometers with an elevation gain of 349 meters, 8.2% average, but it does flatten out in the middle and actually go downhill at some points. So the average grade where you're actually going uphill is probably quite a bit steeper than that. Alright, so straight out the gate, and we are already into some pretty brutal sections. There is a sign saying how steep this road is before you start, so you know what you're getting into, but straight away 300 watts out the gate, 15%, and I'm already in my easiest gear. My good old 36 on the front, 36 on the back, giving me a 1-to-1 ratio. Yeah, this doesn't give you a chance to warm up whatsoever, so make sure you're feeling ready before you turn onto this brutal road. This part of the country is very nice. I do like these really old style cobbled walls and stuff. So like I said, the day before this climb I did Rhino's Pass, so the legs aren't particularly fresh, but to be honest, one 20-minute effort the day before shouldn't really make my legs that much weaker, so no excuses. We're going to see how much power I can do. I reckon this should be around a half an hour effort, but because there are the downhill sections later on, obviously for those bits I'm going to be coasting down, so the average power isn't going to be as high as maybe it should be. According to the training software I'm using, which is Exert, my threshold power at the moment is around 310, so for a half an hour effort I should be able to do slightly higher than that, but like I said, there's downhills here. Obviously when you've got a hill, it's not always going to have the same consistent gradient, so it's quite hard to get a consistent power output for the whole thing. You're going to be surging on the steep bits and resting on the shallower bits, but it is still a good way to see how you're feeling. So for example, now I'm only doing like 200 watts, so obviously my average power is completely dropping, but to be honest, it's not that important. With these sort of climbs, you really do just need to focus on getting the power out when it is steepest, because that is supposedly the quickest way to climb these hills. Alright, so we're about 400 meters in and it is horrible already, 17%, 50 RPM, but the good thing about this is it is right at the beginning of the climb, so I have the energy in my legs just to stand up and grind this out. The problem with Rhino's Pass was that the steepest bit came at the end. It just kept getting steeper and steeper, and when your legs are already pretty blunted, there is no way you can just grind it out like this. So I'm not even doing that much power here, only like 320, 330 watts, but I am keeping it going, 8 kilometers an hour, snail's pace up here, but when you are hauling about 105 kilograms yourself plus the weight of the bike up the hill, it is what it is. Using the whole width of the road here. Another early one, it's about probably before 6 AM I think I left at 5, so it was probably about 5:30 now, because I wanted to do this with a completely quiet road because it's just nicer, isn't it? Plus when I get home I can have a huge buffet breakfast without feeling guilty. The weather was pretty grim though. It wasn't raining at this moment, but last night it was chucking it down, so the roads are wet, but hopefully I shouldn't be suffering too much. And at this point it's not steep enough that it being wet makes a big effect. If it were, for example, loads of leaves on the road, that's when the grip really starts to go. Alright, still 15%. It's been 15% for ages. This bit does go on, and just keeping the power around 320, 330, and I'm keeping it going quite well. My heart rate isn't too high, 166, not too bad at all. My highest ever heart rate is around 190, so I've still got plenty in reserve here. This climb isn't quite as in the middle of nowhere as Rhino's Pass was, so I don't think we'll see any sheep running across the road. but there is a higher chance of seeing some cars, so we will see if we get any. Hopefully not. It's leveled out a tiny bit here, still 8%, still in my easiest gear, but I'm managing to spin quite a bit higher. 80 RPMs feels very quick compared to how it was before. Having a bit of rest, only like 270 watts. You can't really let up too much on any sort of climb like this because obviously you're just going to waste time. You want to keep your power output as smooth as possible. So I'm doing these climbs because I am training for the Dragon ride, which is one of the UK's hardest Grand Fondos. I am having second thoughts. I signed up for the hardest ride, which is the Dragon Devil, which is 4,500 meters of climbing and 300 kilometers. And to be honest, with how much I am struggling with these climbs, I'm thinking that I might need to drop down a distance. The second longest one seems more my level. It is 220 kilometers with 3,500 meters of climbing. So I think maybe I'll decide this on the day. Maybe I will drop down to that one because I am not that good at climbing still. And my longest ever ride, to put into context, is 170 kilometers, and that had less than 1,000 meters of climbing. So even if I do the Grand Fondo, it will be by far the hardest ride I've ever done, which, yeah, I don't want to really not enjoy it because it's too hard. Like, I don't want to spend the last 6 hours of the ride just thinking, I wish I wasn't here. I feel like with the second longest, the Dragon Grand Fondo, I feel like that distance would be perfect. I feel like I'll really be feeling it at the end, but I don't think I will be miserable, if that makes sense. It will still be a really big challenge for me. So like I said, this climb is about half an hour long, and I don't think I can commentate for half an hour. So what I'm going to do is leave this video up in full, so if you ever come to this part of the world and want to recon this climb, this video is there for you. But I'm going to skip to the end with my commentary anyway, so I'll put a timestamp in the video, so click to that time and that's when I start commentating again. It'll probably be quite near the end.
Hi, sheep.
Right, welcome back. So this is the point where it starts to sort of level out. Up to this point it's pretty consistent. Well, it's consistently uphill. So my average power up till now was around 300 watts, but now the downhills start and obviously my average power is going to start dropping. It is really, really nice, this part of England. Definitely give it a go if you're in the country. It's definitely worth visiting, even if you're not riding your bike. Just come and see some of the countryside. So because it eases off, there's definitely a chance for your legs to get a bit of a rest. And let me tell you, you definitely need that, because the final kicker on this climb is absolutely brutal. I've told you all about Rhino's Pass and the 25% there. I would say that this final part of the climb is almost just as bad, because it is just relentless. If there wasn't this rest in between, I don't think I would have made it up again. It's just not nice. All of these climbs here, not the longest in the world, but the gradients are just brutal. So I'm running a 1x, 36 tooth on the front, and my smallest cog on the back is a 10. To be honest, I thought I would be spinning out quite a lot on the flat, and if there is like a -1 or a -2 gradient, sometimes I do, but if it's just flat, then I find that I don't actually spin out that much. I've been doing intervals on my local roads, and some of them are like 5 minutes at 350 watts or something, and to be honest, I've been able to do those fine. I thought I would be spinning out a lot more, so I'm pretty happy with using a smaller chainring on the front. Obviously I only made it smaller to do these climbs. After the Dragon ride I'm gonna switch it back to like a 40 or maybe a 42, but I might leave my big cassette on the back. Sometimes I run a 10 to 30, which is fine because there's just not much climbing around where I am, but I do quite like having a 10 to 36 on the back. It just gives you that little bit more range. Yeah, getting up some nice speed now on these little downhills. It's not constantly downhill, it's just sort of up and down for a while, but your legs do get a nice rest, which is definitely needed, because coming up now is brutal. Oh, there was a sheep. I thought we wouldn't see any on this ride, but we did. Right, my heart rate is getting nice and low now. 150, that's where it should be. Average power down to 290, and I actually have a tailwind for once. So you might be wondering, how are you collecting that headwind and tailwind data? I have the new Wahoo Element Ace, and that has a wind sensor on the front, and to be honest I think it's pretty cool. I've seen lots of reviews saying it's a bit rubbish, but when you like getting your data overlaid on videos like this, it is pretty cool to have. Right, let's talk about weight. Last time I said I'm between 92 and 93 kilograms. At the time of recording this voiceover, I have got under 91. I was 90.7 the other day. I will soon, hopefully, be into the 80s for the first time since I was probably a child. So the climbing dream might still be a reality. The long-term goal is around 80 kilograms, but we'll see how that goes. With all this training I've been doing, the weight has been coming off, but slowly, and I have managed to keep the power in my legs, which was the one worry, that if I lose too much weight I will lose strength on the bike. That hasn't happened. I have lost about 5 kilograms and kept all the power in my legs, which is the goal. So overall I am very happy with that. Alright, this is it. This is the beginning of the last little kicker. You can see on the altitude graph at the bottom that it was pretty flat for a while, and now it's just really pretty steep. This bit it's not nice because it just gets steeper and steeper, and the final push to the end is the worst bit. But it isn't a straight line, it is these hairpins, so you can go right to the edge of the road and minimize the gradient, which is quite nice. At the moment it's just, you know, a casual 17%, putting out cheeky 400 watts to keep the bike moving. The rest really did help. At this point I've got some energy back in my legs. I feel like my rider profile is quite a punchy one. I can put out a solid 5-10 minute effort and then have a short break and be able to do it again. The problem I have is doing a longer effort than that. Overall, as a rider, I feel like I have quite good recovery. What I mean by that is, in the ride, I feel like I can recover quite quickly from efforts, and I think that's because I am able to eat quite a lot on the bike without feeling bad. I haven't really been training for this, but I have been eating a lot of carbs on the bike, and what I read online is that you should aim for 100 grams of carbs per hour, and to be honest, I'm able to do way more than that quite easily, and I don't really have any stomach issues. So maybe that's because I had years of being fat and I am just able to process things easily. But yeah, I feel like give me carbs and I can keep going. I'll give you an example. Recently I was doing an interval effort as just one of those workouts you do, which was actually after this video was filmed. It was it was 6-minute efforts, and it was a 3-hour ride, and some of the efforts came at the beginning, some of them came at the end, and I felt better towards the end of that 3-hour ride. Like, I could do more power at the end than I could at the beginning. That's probably a combination of not being warmed up, but I think it shows that my power doesn't really drop off over time really. So I guess that's one of the good things about my rider profile, and it's just one of the advantages of probably being able to eat quite a lot of carbs. So for that, I did actually set a power record. I did 370 watts for 6 hours. No, sorry, not for 6 hours. That would be insane. For 6 minutes, which was a new record. That was a couple of days ago, so I was pretty happy with that. Overall, I do feel quite good about my fitness at the moment. I'm definitely the strongest I've ever been, and I'm also the lightest I've ever been. Alright, let's get back to commentating this ride rather than just reminiscing about a random workout. 20% at this point, 340 watts, putting out the power and just grinding it really. This is what broke me on Rhino's Pass. It's just the low cadences combined with being already exhausted. But like I said, I had a bit of a rest earlier. Heart rate 177, so I'm quite near the limit. Right, we are 25 minutes into this climb and there's still a tiny bit to go, but this is the worst bit. You can see the finish line up on the top there where those buildings are. It looks so close, but it is horrible. 6 kilometers an hour, 18%, just wringing the last little bits of energy out of my legs. 39 RPM, keeping it below 50 at all times pretty much. Absolutely just grinding it out at this point. If you've ever been here, you know these ones aren't nice at all. No way you can possibly spin up this unless you're running a lower than 1-to-1 ratio, but it is almost there. Last little bit of power. I do remember that I tried to sprint for the end and give it everything. I think I'm starting my semi-sprint now, but you can see even to the line it is high teens, 19% at the moment. It's not the brutal gradients of Rhino's Pass, but anything above 15, you're gonna be struggling. Alright, this is it, finally just digging it all out for the end. 400 watts, the slowest sprint in the world to the finish line, giving everything. 400, 500 watts, and there's the finish line there. Let's see if I can cross it. Heart rate did go over 180 there, so I was giving it everything and crossing the line here for a time of around 26 minutes and 52 seconds. But according to Strava, I did the entire climb in 22 minutes 44. That did put me in 7,000th place out of 17,000, so top half. I am pretty happy with that. Again, I'm not sure where the exact starting point of this climb was, but Strava said I'm in the top half, so I will take that. Definitely a pretty tough challenge, this one. The break in the middle does help a lot. It allows you to get your bearings, get your breath back before the final steep push. Anyway, I'm gonna head down this mountain, head down Kirkstone Pass. Again, I will leave the full video up in case you want to scope out that descent, and then I will start commentating on the ride up Kirkstone Pass. Alright, see you in a bit. Check for timestamps.
go. left turn ahead. Right turn ahead. Turn right. Turn left. Rerouting.
Alright, let's roll. where it starts going uphill. Right, so here we are on Kirkstone Pass. The descent and then the quick turnaround didn't take long, probably about 10-15 minutes. As you can see from the altitude graph at the bottom, I'm around halfway distance-wise into this climb. That's because the first half of it is sort of like up and down, and this is the point here where it starts being consistently uphill. I figured it makes more sense to start my effort from here because I wanted a consistent power output. So this one shouldn't take too long. The elevation gain from this point isn't that high, probably around 300 meters. So I'm thinking maybe a 15-minute effort. Right, let's get straight into it. First up, it was absolutely chucking it down. Well, it wasn't actually, it was just lots of spray from the road, and it seems to have absolutely ruined my camera. So sorry about the quality there, but not much I can really do about it. But yeah, here we go, trying to keep it nice and smooth. This one doesn't have anywhere near the steepness of the previous ones. A nice manageable 9%, keeping it around 80 RPM in my easiest gear, and let me tell you, that feels so nice compared to the really steep climb earlier. But yeah, like I said, I'm trying to keep my power around 300. That should be a power that I can hold for quite a long time. Like I said, 310 watts is my FTP, so just keeping it slightly under that, especially that I already have a big effort in legs. So yeah, it'll be quite interesting to see what I can hold after already doing the struggle. Kirkstone Pass is a really nice road. They must have recently resurfaced it because it was fantastic. It was so smooth compared to a lot of the other climbs. You could absolutely bomb it down here without any fear of hitting a pothole, which is a nice change in England because, to be honest, the roads are pretty bad most places you go. So average power so far, 275, keeping it pretty steady to begin with. I'm trying to save something in the legs for when the gradients do get a bit steeper. When it's a nice easy gradient, I sort of just back off a bit. Anyway, I'm going to skip to the end. If you want to hear my commentary, I'll put a timestamp down below. I will see you at the end. Alright, about 12 minutes into the effort here. Average power, almost 300 watts. I'm keeping it pretty steady, which is good. But towards the end of this climb, it does start getting a bit steeper. Nothing like the struggle. We're not seeing 25% here. When I say steeper on this climb, I mean like 15, 16%, which on a normal day is pretty tough. But when you've been going up the struggle, it sort of seems quite chill, to be honest. Off the 3 climbs I did, which were Rhino's Pass, the Struggle and Kirkstone Pass was by far the easiest. It was just a lot shallower. The road was really nice as well. Rhino's Pass was very difficult, couldn't make it to the top. The Struggle, hard but manageable. So yeah, Kirkstone Pass, pretty easy in the grand scheme of things. My power, I've got quite a lot left in the legs at the moment, so the last little push to the top, I'm going to try and empty myself, because after I get to the top, it's just a nice descent back to the hotel, so I know that I can just fully leave everything on the road here. So this climb is so shallow that I'm not even in my easiest gear, in the 28 tooth cog at the moment, and admittedly I am grinding out at like 50 RPM, but I think that's by choice, not because I'm being forced to. I'm trying to put out loads of power. I think I was just grinding for some reason, not sure why. Sometimes when you're climbing, it's quite nice to just slow down the cadence and then speed it up again just to use different muscles, but when you're in a low cadence just because you have to be and you've got to do it for ages, that's when it gets bad. This climb is a bit annoying because you keep going round these corners thinking it's the last push, but it does keep going on. I didn't have any of the bike computer climb features turned on for some reason, you know, where it tells you where the end of the climb is. I was just going on the road basically, so I should really have set that up in advance. For the dragon ride, I will have the route saved into my GPS, so I should have more information on the climbs themselves, but hopefully none of them are going to be as hard as this. Most of them average about 5% rather than the ridiculous like 10-15% which I've been training on, but they should be a lot easier. Hopefully those sort of shallow climbs shouldn't be as brutal, because it's the really steep ones where being heavy makes a bigger difference. So a nice shallow climb, hopefully I can average like 280 watts going up them and maintain a nice high speed. But I'll be doing a more in-depth video of my plan for race day. That will be coming out probably next week. So I'll be doing that video and also a bike check video, so be sure to subscribe if you want to see my pre-Dragon Ride rundown. Average power gone up to 305. That's probably about where it should be for such a short effort. Getting up to 15 minutes, so it would be nice if I could maintain 310 watts for that. It should be pretty easy to maintain FTP for a short amount of time like that, but it does start to flatten off a bit, just 3% here, and then at the end, through the mist off my condensation camera, you can see what I believe to be the top. So it's one more big push, just pushing a slightly harder gear here on the 21 tooth at the moment, and yeah, still managing to keep the power down, 300 watts, final push, heart rate 175, so not really into the very deep red, but almost at the edge. 500 watts here, just giving it the last little bit to the top, and it is almost done. Literally just trying to empty the tank here. 20 kilometers an hour into the headwind, flattening out, and I'm not sure where it finishes, but I assume I gave up here. So yeah, 15 minutes, 43 seconds, average power 310 watts, not too shabby at all. And now there is a nice downhill, which goes all the way to Lake Windermere. I wish the camera didn't fog up here because the views are really, really nice. You can see the lake down in the distance, and it is a pretty cool place. I've said it many times, but if you fancy a really brutal cycling holiday in the UK, come to the Lake District and you will be in shock of how hard some of the climbs are. It's not that they're particularly long, but it's just brutal. The steepness is something else. Alright, that's it from me. I hope you enjoyed. Give these climbs a go yourself if you're in the area, and I will see you next time for my bike check off the Dragon Ride. Peace out.